by 3 points. The Owls scored the winning touchdown.
Welcome back to another Stand on Guard at question period. I'm going to shut her off. I promised to be on live here at 2:15. We're here just listening to some of the statements by the members. We'll have question period will be starting shortly. Wanted to advise you all that there will be a protest tomorrow on Parliament Hill from agriculture and farmers who are going to be in town to say they need a carve out on the carbon tax too. And Trudeau is dead set against giving them that. We know the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, Stephen Guilbeault, has been actively trying to tell senators to not support a bill that will give farmers a pause on the carbon tax, just like people in Atlantic Canada who use fuel oil to heat their homes are getting a pause. So farmers deserve it too, probably more so. Do you want to see food in the grocery stores? Farmers are really being stifled. They're really being attacked. They're really being downsized by this Liberal government, being told they can't use fertilizer, being told they can't use pesticides, huge amount of regulations. And now the carbon tax is still persisting. They need relief. So tomorrow, 12:30 in Parliament Hill, the Centennial Flame. I invite people listening to be there. And we will be joining the fun and games here very shortly. Don't expect Trudeau to be there today, but I hope there's some mention about the carbon tax and farmers today. Lots of stuff going on this week. They've been off for a week, having a great time back in their ridings, and they're back in Ottawa this week. So let's see what happens. We'll just listen for a while here.
And what followed proved them right. They qualified for the playoffs, beat defending champions Toronto, and then took on the mighty Winnipeg Blue Bombers in yesterday's final. Congratulations to quarterback Cody Fajardo, who played the game of his life, and to all of his teammates. The Grey Cup, they're bringing it back to Montreal. They're bringing it back to Quebec. They're bringing it home. It's something to be proud of, Mr. Speaker. The Alouettes are flying even higher.
The honourable member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada we have after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government is tent cities across the country, violent crime up 39%, more than 2 million people visiting a food bank in 1 month, over 50% of Canadians saying they're $200 away from being broke, middle-class working people living in their cars, and 9 in 10 young Canadians feeling they will never own a home. People are losing hope, and this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. The Liberal $600 billion of inflationary debt and countless tax hikes are increasing the cost of all we buy. We need to reverse this course of misery. In order to consider supporting this mini budget, the common sense Conservatives demand that the fall economic statement counsels Liberal plans to quadruple the carbon tax, announces a plan and date to balance the budget to bring down inflation and interest rates, and builds homes, not bureaucracy. Only our common sense Conservative plan bring home lower prices for Canadians.
Hear, hear. The honourable member from Thunder Bay, Rainy River.
Seventh Generations Educational Institute is an Anishinaabe-led organization to provide secondary and post-secondary training to Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in the Treaty 3 region of Northwestern Ontario. It all started in 1985 in the back of pickup trucks going from community to community. Now it has campuses in Fort Frances, Kenora, and Sioux Lookout. The Institute teaches people the technical skills needed to find employment, but also teaches Anishinaabe language, culture, and tradition. Let me acknowledge two young people whose lives have been changed thanks to 7 Gens. Carrie Yerksa and Jeremy Andy, both from Couchiching First Nations. Carrie completed the Women's Empowerment Program and is now teaching full-time in the community. Andy completed the Anishinaabe Moan Adult Learner Program, is now employed by 7 Gens teaching the Anishinaabe Moan language. Please join 7 Generations staff and former students, along with the living legend, Donald Rusnak, and myself, and Sir John A. MacDonald, room 200, beginning at 5:45. Miigwech.
Oral question, questions orales, l'honorable chef de l'opposition.
After 8 years of this Liberal government, this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. According to the PBO and the Governor of the Bank of Canada, I'm right. This Liberal Prime Minister is adding to inflation and interest rates. Scotiabank has said that these deficits are increasing interest rates by 2%. That means another $700 per month for paying the average mortgage. Before Canadians lose their homes, will this Prime Minister finally accept my common sense plan and announce a date and a plan for balancing the budget and reducing inflation and interest rates?
See if they bring this around to climate change as usual.
The Honourable President of the
No,
Treasury
Trudeau.
Board. Mr. Speaker, unlike the Conservatives, our government has a plan to help Canadians to get through this difficult period. For example, we are helping 4 million Canadians with the Canada Workers' Benefit. We are also helping 6 million Canadians thanks to indexing old age security. What is the Conservative plan? No, the fact is they don't have one.
We get rid of you.
Chef de l'opposition.
Speaker, after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost of mortgage payments, which are already up 150%. And the Bank of Canada and the Parliamentary Budget Officer now agree with me that his deficits are driving up interest rates. Scotiabank says deficits are driving mortgage rates up 2%. That works out to $700 per month. While carpenters and nurses are already living in their cars, and the IMF says Canada's mortgage holders are the most at risk of crisis, will the Prime Minister finally accept my common sense plan and announce the date and the plan to balance the budget and bring down interest rates on Canadian mortgages so people don't lose their homes?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, let's be clear and accurate. Much of that spending referred to by the Leader of the Opposition was provincial in nature, not federal, Mr. Speaker. And in addition, unlike the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker, we actually have a plan to help Canadians, especially vulnerable Canadians. And the Deputy
We have a plan to destroy the
Prime
country.
Minister will table additional aspects of that plan tomorrow in the fall economic statement. But let's be clear, we are here for Canadians every single step of the way, unlike the party opposite that votes against every single time, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's plan is to increase mortgage payments by 150%, which he's already done. And now Scotiabank says government deficits have added 2 percentage points to interest rates. That works out to $700 a month, or $8,400 a year in higher mortgage payments linked directly to deficits, including the massive deficits by this government. A year ago, they promised to balance budget. They broke the promise 6 months later. Will they come back tomorrow with a plan to balance the budget so we can bring down interest rates and inflation so that Canadians can keep their homes?
Hey, at this point, I want to say, if you're watching, please comment. I try to respond on air.
Mr. Speaker, with
And
respect,
please,
we
I
have a
welcome
plan
your
that's going
comments.
to build more homes. It's going to restore a level of affordability in the market. Where we are cutting taxes on home builders, he wants to raise them. where we are funding cities to increase their ambition on home building, he wants to cut them. Mr. Speaker, it is hard to accept criticisms from
This
a
is the
member
guy
of the House of
flapping
Commons
flapping
who,
his
when he had
arms
the
while he flaps his
opportunity
gums.
to be the minister responsible for housing, had access to $300 million and only got 99 homes built. Mr. Speaker, we are going to build homes, and we are going to build them by the millions.
By the millions, yeah. And nobody will be able to afford to live in them. So they don't even realize it's counterproductive.
Mr. Speaker, when I was housing minister, mortgage payments were less than half of what they are now, and rent was less than half of what it is now. Those are the hard realities. And now his plan, the Prime Minister's plan, is to quadruple the carbon tax. Quadruple it. That will increase the cost of gas, heat, groceries, and yes, even housing, because it takes trucks to ship those building materials. We know that we will have a carbon tax election to decide on whether we axe the tax as I choose or whether we hike it as he promises. But can we accept a Canadian compromise and at least freeze the tax in the meantime? Yes or no?
Yeah, they're going to build a million homes which nobody can afford to live in.
Mr. Speaker, it's interesting to listen to this version of revisionist history of the honourable member's time as a minister responsible for housing. If we actually go back and look at the numbers, you're going to see that he actually had housing starts less than 200,000 a year. Mr. Speaker, this morning we've seen data that shows that we're on pace to build more than 256,000 this year. If we want to compare apples to apples, Mr. Speaker, we're going to make a difference. Do you like apples? We're going to beat his numbers. How do you like them apples?
Well, he does pretty good holding an apple talking to a reporter. I'll say that for Poilievre.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I think the minister should stick to photo ops because comedy is surely not his thing. Neither are numbers, Mr. Speaker. Everything the Prime Minister has said about the Stellantis subsidy has proven false. One, it's billions of dollars over budget before shovels in the ground, years behind payback even before the project begins. And he claimed that it was going to create jobs for Canadians. We now learn that at least 1,500 or a majority of the jobs are going to go to temporary foreign workers. Will the Prime Minister release the contract now so that we can find out how much Canadian taxpayers are going to have to spend to give paychecks to South Korean workers?
The Honourable Minister for Housing and Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, during the COVID-19 pandemic, he opposed spending that was supporting families. Now, during a national housing crisis, he opposes government investment.
I love this comment from Pam Irwin talking about Sean Fraser. Is he a friggin' traffic cop?
Our economy could be when we create many thousands of jobs. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to invest in the Canadian economy and put workers in make sure they bring home paychecks that are going to put food on the table for their families.
No, you know.
The honourable member for La Prairie.
All right, we set him. Got some great comments here from folks that I want to comment on here. If I get your last name wrong, I'm sorry. Linda Gemans or Jomans. No one will be able to afford homes. Are they single-family homes or rentals owned by big corporations? Well, you know what Trudeau's doing here, of course. You know what the Trudeau government is all about. They want to build homes that you don't own. You will own nothing. There's a great book out right now called You Will Own Nothing. And that is the plan of the World Economic Forum, that you will own nothing. You won't own your home. The government or the super state or the super corporation will own your home. And you will just live there. And you'll be in a 15-minute city where you can't leave. This is a very ominous future. And you can listen to it unfold as you listen to these idiots in the Liberal cabinet. Because they're telling you they're going to build 1 million homes. And Poilievre is just telling them the interest rates are so high and they're going up higher that people can't afford mortgages. People can't afford rent. They've gone up, they've doubled in the last 10 years. So how are people going to live in these million homes, apartments, or whatever they are that they produce? They're not going to be owning them. It is going to be collectivization of everything. Anyway, I'll let you get. We'll get back. I wanted to make those comments. Keep the comments coming. Jerry Lee, 4.2 billion for refugee programs, not our homeless, not our seniors, not our veterans, refugee programs. Where the heck is this money coming from? Well, it's coming from the deep dark abyss of the Liberal government. They're printing more money than they can even use, and that this is contributing to inflation. It's going to continue to contribute to inflation, just like it is in the U.S. The dollar is becoming worthless. It's a peso.
For food assistance in schools. The Honourable Minister. I'd like to thank my colleague for his question.
Many Canadians
there's Jenna
are
Suds
having
again.
a hard time putting food on the table. And we're working with provinces, territories, municipalities, key stakeholders as we work to develop a national school food policy. We are doing the hard work now together with our partners, understanding the importance of moving forward together. We'll continue this progress. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, people are struggling to pay for rent and
Looks
groceries.
like Jugmeat's not there again today.
People are actually coming together to help food banks that are buckling under the strain. And meanwhile, big CEOs are raking in the profits. Loblaws alone brought in $18 billion in profits in a single semester. We've never seen that before. Their greed is boundless, and the Liberals are doing nothing to stop them. Tomorrow is a concrete opportunity to help people. Will the Liberals have the courage?
Anyway, I encourage you, if you're watching now, to like the station. What we have to do, and please share it, because we need to expand the audience, because YouTube is suppressing this broadcast to the only people who have seen it before. So like the broadcast, ring the bell. Please let people know you're watching this, because I really want to make this a political highlight of the day for like-minded people. I want to do that, and it takes some commitment to get on here every day and do this, because it's sometimes you wonder if people are watching or people are listening. Thank you for everybody doing that today. Encourage your friends and relatives to tune in and become part of this experience. What we're doing here is we are becoming part of the rebellion. We are resolving to resist the Trudeau government and Trudeau censorship. That's what we're doing here.
At this time in our country. And I would like to thank all of our colleagues here in the House for supporting us with this important piece of legislation. We will continue to be there for the Canadian public.
The Honourable Member from Elmwood Transcona.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bill C-56.
All right. Yeah, where Marvin Wilson asks, where is Freeman? I think you mean Freeland. Where's Chrystia Freeland? She hasn't been there in weeks. And where's Trudeau? Trudeau's never there Monday. You're lucky to see Trudeau once a week. But it's interesting that Freeland is never there. I think she is plotting to overthrow Justin Trudeau right now. And of course, she's also obsessed with keeping Alberta from having its own pension plan. That's her big obsession right now.
And communities.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Oh, there he goes. You're going to start flying again.
He and I will both wait for tomorrow to see the details of the fall economic statement. However, I do want to signal my intent to continue the pattern of investment in affordable housing in particular that's going to make sure everyone in this country has a safe and affordable place to call home. Mr. Speaker, over the 30 years that preceded our time in government, governments of different stripe chose not to make the necessary investments to ensure that we had sufficient affordable housing stock. We're going to continue to make the investments that are necessary in affordable housing to restore something to the ecosystem, and that's a level of affordability that we desperately need.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
After 8 long years, the Governor of the Bank of Canada confirmed that this Prime Minister and his scam of the century, the carbon tax, are not worth the cost. Scrapping the scam would put a massive dent in inflation and help lower interest rates faster, all at a time when Canadians are choosing between eating and heating their homes because of Liberal inflation and because of the carbon tax. Will the Finance Minister accept our Conservative leaders' common sense ask to axe their plans to quadruple
we'll see if Freeland is here.
Carbon tax in tomorrow's
I don't think she is, but sometimes they come in late.
Yes or no?
Hey, have you noticed they've stopped the BS with the sound?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
They told that speaker to go shove
Thank you
it.
very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'm truly glad to hear the Conservative member opposite be so excited for tomorrow's fall economic update, Mr. Speaker. You see, the Minister of Finance and the Deputy Prime Minister
a parliamentary
will be in this
secretary.
House at 4 p.m. tomorrow to reveal our books and to show the plan that we have prepared for
That'll be
Canadians.
Freeland's
Mr.
first
Speaker.
appearance
This is
in
an
weeks.
important moment of transparency for Canadians to see where we are at and where we are going. An important moment as well for Conservatives to actually see the numbers and use the facts in order to have intelligent debate in this House.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
Well, more photo ops aren't going to help anyone here in Canada, Mr. Speaker. And what we won't do as a Conservative government is create two classes of Canadians like this Liberal NDP government did by giving 3% of Canadians in Atlantic Canada, where the Prime Minister's poll numbers were tanking, a break, while the rest of Canadians get absolutely nothing and have to freeze and starve in the dark. 2 million Canadians are visiting a food bank in a month. This in just a single month. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost after 8 years. Will they cancel their plan to quadruple their carbon tax in tomorrow's false hopes update? Yes or no?
Yeah, this economic update tomorrow is apparently going to be a real disaster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What the honourable member
Oh,
says is
no.
both factually incorrect and grossly misleading. We have put a price on pollution in this country.
Somebody had to start it.
address
Somebody had to
the
start the
existential
price
threat
on
that is climate
pollution
change,
bullshit.
but do so in a manner that is affordable. 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back than they pay in the
It's a
carbon
lie.
price. It is a manner that is
I-
affordable for
look at-
Canadians.
if you-
at the
and if you
same
don't
time
believe me,
taking on and addressing what is a clear
look
threat
this
to the
up for
future of our
yourself.
children.
This is
It
a
such
liberal
shame
lie.
that in
A
this
liberal
country, we still
lie.
have a political party that doesn't believe that climate change is
That
real.
8 out of 10 Canadians are not getting more back in the carbon tax rebate than they're spending on the carbon tax. That is a
Mr.
complete
Speaker, after
falsehood.
8 years of out-of-control spending by this Liberal government, experts at Scotiabank now say that 2 percentage point of interest rate increases are due to government spending. An extra 2% on mortgage costs means over $8,000 a year for Canadian borrowers. Canadians are realizing this Prime Minister's not worth the cost. When Scotiabank says you're richer than you think, they didn't mean spend like drunken sailors. So on what date will the government balance the budget?
The Honourable Parliamentary
The
Secretary.
calendar doesn't go that far.
Mr. Speaker, let's speak about balance, because our government believes that you can balance compassion with fiscal responsibility. And that is what we have shown up to date, Mr. Speaker. Canada continues to have the lowest deficit among all G7 countries. Canada continues to have the lowest debt to GDP ratio among all G7 countries. And the very report that that member is citing, Mr. Speaker, states that the major drivers of interest rate increases were COVID supports and provincial spending, not federal spending, but provincial spending, Mr. Speaker.
Great comment here from Jim Halishuk. I can hardly afford to live anymore. That says more than all of this crap from the Liberals you're
Prime
hearing.
Minister, take responsibility for the government spending because it's driving inflation and making interest rates unaffordable for Canadians. The Bank of Canada says that all governments need to spend less than 2% in order to keep inflation under control. This own government's projections in the budget in the spring says that this government will spend over 3.5% growth next year versus this year. So when are they going to get it? They are part of the problem. They have to balance the budget so Canadians can keep their homes.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite talks about responsibility. It's this government that took its responsibility seriously. When times were tough, when COVID hit, and even today, Mr. Speaker, we continue to have Canadians' backs. We don't just talk about compassion, Mr. Speaker. We act in that manner by being there for vulnerable Canadians, by being there in order to lift over 2.3 million Canadians out of poverty, by ensuring over 1 million more Canadians have a job today than they did before COVID. Mr. Speaker, we are there for Canadians while being fiscally responsible, and I am certainly looking forward to tomorrow's fiscal update.
You know, I'm so tired of hearing about how we have the lowest inflation and the G7 lowest debt to GDP ratio. Blah, 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 blah. Just ask your neighbor, ask your family members, ask your friends. How difficult is it to live today? Go to the grocery store and find out how far your paycheck goes. Fill your tank up with gas, pay your heating bills. You know these numbers are cooked, and they keep telling us how good we have it. Oh, by the way, Samantha Wiles, I love the fact you have Marilyn Monroe on your your identity there. Good for you.
Tomorrow. But I would like to hear my colleague from Quebec, on the other hand, talk about what he's considering in his austerity plan. Is he thinking that we should make cuts to the new childcare spaces that we've made? Is he thinking that we should cut supports for our seniors? Is that it? I think my colleague should be specific at this point. We will be listening. The honorable member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Well, the first thing we'd cut is useless spending like on ArriveCan and various other expenses during COVID that even the parliamentary budget officer has no idea what it was for. That's hundreds of millions of dollars that was spent on nothing. We have an incredibly long list of such expenses from this government. If we cut all that out, we get back to a balanced budget and Canadians would do a lot better. Will this Prime Minister come back to a balanced budget tomorrow in the economic...
Yeah, comment here from Kelly Kingston Marciano. Yeah, Canadians are getting poorer. They're getting poorer by the hour, by the day, and by the week. So, and we all know that. It's
so he wants to make other types of cuts.
Looks like Pablo needs another haircut.
Conservatives' policy. What exactly would they cut? Childcare, help for seniors, or would he do nothing about climate change? He wants us to do less on women's rights, on human rights, on and he really wants to bring us back to the Stone Age.
There it is. First time this week you've heard Stone Age. I wrote about that last week in my Substack, actually. This is such crap.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we need to talk about
I gotta shut her up for a minute.
Management of the
Blockheads, be quiet. You heard Stone Age for the first time from Pablo there. This is so ironic because, of course, it's the Liberals, as I point out in a recent Substack article, that want to turn us back to the Stone Age because they don't want us to have enough heat. They don't want us to have any fossil fuels, and there's no green alternative to the fossil fuels. Guilbeault wants to shut off the electricity, turn off the lights, and now he's saying we should be using wood instead of natural gas. So we'll be sitting in our caves. You've seen that classic picture, the caveman there sitting around his campfire. That's how the Liberals see Canadians living, in the literal Stone Age. Now, how is the Conservative plan going to put us in a Stone Age when they're saying we need to live prosperous lives? We need equality, and we cannot be taxed to death. I mean, this is just such hokum, such garbage. But what else do you expect from these jokers?
Increase officers at the border to ensure that safety there is maintained. The honourable member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, I repeat, there is a human smuggling network at the Canadian border organized by Mexican drug cartels. And the federal government knows all about that because our intelligence services told the government what was happening.
This is an interesting question, actually.
In fact, it said
because it's
that
like
at some point,
it's this times 1,000 at the U.S. southern border.
Is going to have to wake up in Ottawa. The Quebec government also said that the federal government is unfortunately not doing its work, and Quebec is having to take on that burden. Mr. Speaker, when will this government finally take back control of its own borders?
Well, that's a damn good... I can't believe the Bloc asked that question. That's a damn good question.
The Honourable Minister.
Because, of course,
Mr. Speaker,
we have no control over our borders.
With my colleague, but we have not lost control of the border. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker,
and child smuggling is a travesty,
our intelligence and security services. As much as possible, under Canadian intelligence legislation, we are sharing information to enable our partners, whether American, Mexican, Canadian, including our Quebec partners, to enable them to do everything they can to better secure our borders. And I'm looking forward to continuing these positive discussions with the minister in Quebec on this topic. The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, just for a second, put yourself in the shoes of people trying to leave Mexico. They're willing to do a lot to leave their country, especially because of the cartels. Cartels that have tendrils everywhere and absolutely no respect for human life.
Now you got to ask yourself.
And then imagine how they feel when they get to Canada and they realize that the same old cartels are controlling the border here. Those same cartels, even in Canada, are going to make money off them. Mr. Speaker, when will this government finally show some humanity? When will it finally take back control of the border?
This is quite fascinating. These questions are being raised by the Bloc. Now, why is the Bloc concerned about Canadian sovereignty? Obviously, they're worried about these people coming into Quebec because that's where they're coming across the New York border. But they're raising an issue that conservatives haven't even raised of late. The child smuggling, the prostitution. What's coming across the border? Because it's not closed, it's porous.
In order to do everything we can to continue to keep our borders safe. Of course, we are always looking for new good ideas to better improve the situation.
Not looking for any idea.
Honourable member
They don't
from
want any idea
South
how to
Surrey,
close the border.
White Rock.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government and 2 years of their housing accelerator, photo ops are up exponentially, but investment in housing construction is down 14%. The Prime Minister promised to make housing more affordable. What has he delivered? Nothing but photos of suits in boots. Canada has the lowest number of housing units per capita in the G7. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. When will he put aside his photo op obsession and focus on roofs overheads and keys indoors?
Well, that's a good question. Good question. Of course, you'll get a very bad answer on this.
Housing, infrastructure, and communities.
Mr. Speaker, it's an excellent question, if only if it were based in fact. The member has claimed that, in fact, investment in housing has gone down. I read from the Stats Canada report issued just this morning that multi-unit construction rose 8.2% to $6.6 billion in September, with all provinces reporting gains. Mr. Speaker, residential builds up 7.3% to $12.9 billion. With respect to the Housing Accelerator Fund, we have deals with Kitchener, Calgary, Kelowna, cities across the country, totaling over the next 10 years more than 175,000 more
No, that's
homes.
outrageous.
They promised to cut it.
That's outrageous that he gets away with this crap because they don't connect the dots.
Mr. Speaker,
That is so
photo
typical.
ops don't build homes. We need more homes in Canada, a lot more, not less. 14% less year over year is what failure looks like. We need homes, not bureaucracy. Since this housing minister took over, investment in housing construction is still plummeting, down 14% year over year. Yeah. After 8 years, rent and down payments have doubled and mortgages are up 150%. Yeah. When will this Prime Minister stop the photo ops, let builders build so Canadians can move into homes they can afford? Yeah.
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I hate to delight in such a moment where the honourable member in good faith tries to pose a question but just doesn't have the facts. She has claimed that investment has plummeted literally on the day that Stats Canada has indicated it's increased by 7.3%. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the strategy we're going to use to build more homes, we're going to change the math to make it work for builders by reducing taxes. They plan to raise it.
They don't reduce taxes.
By putting money
Liberals
on the table, they plan to
are
cut
opposed
it.
to reducing taxes.
Necessary. We will engage with the sector and other levels of government to get more homes built, whatever it takes.
All they do is keep repeating a script that has no basis in reality.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I think you all recognize that. Everyone listening today, watching today, recognizes this is nonsense.
Millions of Canadians can't afford to keep their
This
home.
is it. This is it.
According to a recent Scotiabank report, the cost of the average mortgage is going to go up by more than $700 because of their profligate spending. When will these Liberals stop blaming everyone else and finally take responsibility for the housing crisis they caused?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
He's a busy man
Speaker, if the
today,
honourable member wants to do
repeating the
something to
same
help
lines
the
over
housing
and over.
crisis right now, he can talk to his leader and tell him to stop blocking the cut to the GST that's going to unlock hundreds of thousands of homes across this country. Mr. Speaker, we are cutting taxes for home building. They plan to raise them. We are putting on money on the table to get more cities to change the way that they build homes. They want to cut it. And Mr. Speaker,
Not
if his
going to
concern is
make
around
a
spending
difference.
driving inflation, I would ask him to imagine a world where we decided not to support households, not to support businesses through the pandemic. We would be dealing with millions of Canadians who would have lost their home years ago. We are going to make the investments to build millions in the years ahead.
Here,
here. Here.
The Honourable Member from Nunavut.
If the Liberals say that they will do whatever it takes for housing, Nunavut needs $250 million. 1/3 of Nunavut live in homes needing major repairs, and over 50% in my riding are in overcrowded homes. The situation is so bad that TB outbreaks in 2 more communities were announced earlier this year. Last year, the government of Nunavut asked the Liberals for $200 million to build urgently needed housing. So far, they got zero. Will the Minister of Finance announce tomorrow the housing funding that Nunavut desperately needs?
Now watch, Wilkinson will leap to his feet.
Thank you,
No.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for that very important question. We are fully engaged.
Who the hell
with
is
the government
this?
of Nunavut
This
with
guy
Inuit
gets up,
rights
well, like
holders
once a
on
month or
this
once a year?
important issue. In 2022,
Excuse
we
me.
announced $4
My
billion
goodness.
for Indigenous rights holders, including $800 million for Inuit rights holders. We have $4 billion
No, this
as well for the rural.
This was
northern
another
and
housing
northern
question.
strategy,
That
something
they
we're gonna
said
roll
no,
out in the months to come.
because it was an Indigenous person asking the question. You gotta get the Minister of Indian and Northern Affairs, whatever they call it now.
Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Winnipeg is in a dire housing crisis. As of last year, 6,000 people were on a wait list for public housing. People are freezing
Winnipeg's
to
always-
death in bus
always in a
shelters.
crisis.
The Winnipeg City
'Cause they keep
Council is
putting
going
Liberals
to
in
change
charge.
zoning laws in hopes that this government will grant the required funding to deal with the housing crisis. People are dying in the streets. Will the Liberals commit to the $192 million of requested funding to build new housing stock and treat Winnipeg's housing crisis with the urgency it deserves?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Communities and Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I want to say thank you to my honourable colleague for the urgency with which she
That was a great
intends
question.
to address the housing crisis in Winnipeg. I'm pleased to share that I most recently met with the Mayor of Winnipeg just this morning. I've been engaging with the city over the course of the last number of weeks and months in order to help facilitate the very reforms that the council will be debating. We have put federal money on the table to incentivize cities like Winnipeg right across the country to change the way that they allow homes to get built. We're going to continue to work with the most ambitious cities in Canada and use that federal.
He just doesn't get it at all. They're going to be empty apartment blocks, empty homes. It's crazy. Oh,
workers. A commitment we made to
here's
Canadians
a
in
wonderful
2021.
softball
Since
question
tabling the bill,
from
workers
Vivian
and unions have
Lapointe,
applauded this historic move.
who is
11 days later,
who
the
is
leader of
going
the opposition
to
still
ask
hasn't taken a position
for the
on the
minister
legislation.
to
He's had
please
enough time to
tell the
study it,
House
So why is he hesitating to support workers?
how
Can the Minister of
wonderful the
Labour
Liberal
advise
policies
why the
are.
leader of the opposition should stand on the side of working families instead of corporate lobbyists?
They don't. That's totally improper. You don't ask a question of the official opposition leader. This Liberal just obviously.
Honourable members, many issues have been brought up regarding how questions are relevant to
Yeah,
the question of the administration of the House, administration of the government rather, or questions regarding committee chairs. I will be issuing a ruling after question period, after the votes that are going to be happening here. But I see that the minister has stood up on his feet and intends to answer. I will allow the minister to take this if he so desires, but members should be aware of the ruling that will be coming from the Speaker shortly.
Mr. Speaker, we are proud to have tabled legislation to ban the use of replacement workers. Workers have been asking for this legislation longer than this country has existed. This legislation will keep unions and employers at the bargaining table because, Mr. Speaker, that's where the powerful paychecks are created, at the bargaining table. Members of other parties understand the importance of this bill, and I hope that members opposite will as well. But then again, this is a leader who championed two of the most anti-worker, anti-union bills that this House has ever seen. Will he support the bill? We'll see.
The honourable member from Lethbridge.
The Prime Minister promised to make life more affordable for Canadians when he took office, but after 8 years of this Liberal government, rent has doubled, mortgage payments
I got an
have
interesting
skyrocketed, and
breaking
housing
story
prices have
for you
doubled
here.
as well.
But we'll
Just
let
today,
Rachel
we found
finish.
out that housing construction rates are actually down by 14%, concerning investment. Only this Liberal government would use a housing accelerator fund to decelerate housing. Contrary to Liberal belief, photo ops don't build houses. I know this is news. So when will the housing minister stop the photo ops and actually get some work done?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member has concerns about the use of photo ops, I'd suggest she discuss
Oh, we got some internet problems here.
with her leader why he shows up at projects that he had nothing to do with to take a photo, and then uses homelessness as a political
Anyway, got a
social media.
Interesting. It was just handed to me here. Apparently, Trudeau and Stephen Guilbeault, the Environment and Climate Change Minister, are working with the United Nations to create a treaty, an international treaty that will override Canadian law to ban plastics. Because, as you may know, last Friday, or is it Thursday, the federal court ruled that the Trudeau policy on plastics all being toxic, that single-use plastics are all toxic, was too broad a definition. So it looks like they're going to work through the UN to override Canadian law. What do you think of that? What do you think of that?
Down 14%. This minister just isn't getting the job done, despite his promises to Canadians. So when will he stop the photo ops and actually get to work so that Canadians can have a roof over their head?
No, I've got to look into this story about the UN treaty a little more comprehensively before I do a story on it for Post-Millennial. But I don't think that's outrageous. I don't think it's outrageous to say that they would try to do this. That's exactly what Justin Trudeau would do as an acolyte, as a disciple, as a follower of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. Clearly, he would want his problem to be resolved in a globalist fashion. I think this is dangerous. This is highly dangerous. What else could Trudeau appeal to the United Nations to get Canadian laws changed at the stroke of a pen?
Bill over and above the hundreds of thousands that the National Housing Strategy
This
has
is
already
dangerous,
delivered.
dangerous material.
The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have in my hands a copy of the first page of the local newspaper of Thetford Mines. After 8 years of the Liberal government's inflationary policies, here is a sad reality in our regions. And I will read for you. Rise.
Sorry, we're having some problems with the feed today.
In food support
Which
needs.
they
in
usually
Thetford
don't have
Mines.
problems with.
And Scotiabank has confirmed that Liberal
But-
spending has made interest rates rise by 2%.
Wanted to comment on something anyway when
This
this
rise is felt by families who are increasingly going to food banks to feed themselves. Will the Prime Minister stop his massive overspending and tell us exactly when we will have a balanced budget?
Anyway, interesting story here too. I don't know if you notice this, dear viewers. Trudeau devotes a quarter of his time to personal days. As a story in the National Post this morning, which I encourage you to read. But yeah, interesting. I'm always saying how Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden operate in lockstep, how they are completely in unison on domestic and usually on foreign policy. Not necessarily right now, but usually completely in lockstep on environmental policy, on spending, and on just about everything else. And Joe Biden, of course, spends most of his life on the beach in Delaware, doing absolutely nothing. And he does very little when he gets back to the White House, except read the notes on his teleprompter that his handlers are giving him throughout the day. And whenever he makes a speech, very, very irregularly now. But Biden might spend 1/3 to perhaps 40% of his days on personal time. Apparently, Trudeau spends a quarter. I find that very interesting, because it goes to show you he's a lazy ass. He always has been, and he's a narcissistic, lazy ass individual, and that's all he's ever been.
Leader of the Bloc Québécois said to want the balance of power, but he doesn't say how he will balance a Liberal budget. For instance, we know that the Bloc supports the Liberals' inflationary spending. The Bloc will now keep the Liberals in power over the next 2 years. The Bloc supports drastic increases in carbon taxes and inflationary deficits. The Bloc wants to keep the Liberals in power. It's costly to vote Bloc, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister continue sending more and more Quebecers to food banks just to get the support of the Bloc Québécois? Both these parties want to drastically increase taxes at the expense of Canadians.
Yeah, this alliance that Trudeau has forged with the separatists is even more despicable than the alliance he's forged with the socialists. Because at least the socialists in this country, as reprehensible as they are, do believe in something called the United Canada. They believe in confederation. They believe in federalism. The Bloc are a bunch of parasites who are in Ottawa, sucking the blood life out of the rest of Canadians, getting pensions for doing nothing except supporting Quebec autonomy. And they are just beyond the pale. I always have been. But yet Trudeau is latching on to separatists to maintain his tight grip on power. Now that is disgusting. I think all of you would agree. As much as you don't like the NDP, the Bloc are worse, because they're just sitting there collecting paychecks from a country they don't even believe in. And I have been saying this for decades now. Yes, ever since the Bloc first brought their evil and ugly presence into Ottawa. I have always loathed them and wonder what the hell they're even doing sitting there.
Letting Bombardier bid for the contract. Will the Liberal government finally issue a call for tenders? The Honourable Minister.
Patrol aircraft is a vital capability of the Canadian Armed Forces, and it's used for a wide variety of operations.
Bill Open Borders Blair. Failure as a Toronto police chief. Failure as the Open Borders minister. Failure now as defense minister.
Canada has made it very clear the benefits to the Canadian economy and to
total
our defense
failure.
and aerospace sectors is a key consideration in the decision.
Total jackass. He gets his department totally manhandled by spending cuts, and the old fool just stands there and likes it. An absolute failure as a human being. Absolute failure.
Workers a chance to put their expertise to good use.
I'm just getting started.
Before gifting $8 billion in public funds to the United States. Mr. Speaker, it's normal for the U.S. ambassador to defend Boeing.
Thanks
and
for all your
American
comments,
company,
by the way,
that's
today.
his job.
I'm going to read a few more.
What's not normal, though, is that the federal government is
Well,
not
Quebec
even
is
giving
going on
Quebecois
about Quebec
companies a
industry
chance
as
to
they
compete.
always will. Or I should say the Bloc is going on about Quebec industry as they always will. Now, I got a great remark here from Kelly Kingston Marchigiano. Hope I got it correct. Kelly, alliances all over at our expense. UN too now. Yeah, it looks like Trudeau's trying to forge an alliance with the UN as well as the separatists. So he's got the globalist UN, the separatist bloc, and the socialist NDP. He will reach out to anybody to keep his grip on power. That is all Justin Trudeau is about.
$8 billion of financial activity and investment every year, and we will continue.
And that's the guy who told you should get a COVID-19 vaccine shot till the day you die. He's gotten, supposedly, he says, like 3 or 4 shots, and he's got COVID, what, 4 times?
This billion-dollar green slush fund. The NDP Liberal government's hand-picked chair funneled more than $200,000 to her own company and then put $120,000 of that into her own pockets. Now she's being investigated by the ethics commissioner, so she resigned days after the chief executive officer. We're just scratching the surface on the latest of this prime minister's many scandals, and Canadians want to know who got rich.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The Liberals got rich, and their friends.
Distribute taxpayer dollars, however independent of the federal government ministry. We all should expect them to do so responsibly. And that's why the Minister of Innovation acted immediately when allegations of mismanagement surfaced. We've frozen funds, ordered an independent review, are collaborating with the Auditor General, and both the CEO and the board chair have stepped down.
He's talking about champagne there, of course.
Accountable, and we're committed to getting.
I don't mean the bottled kind.
This issue. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
They're not holding anyone accountable. Let's just get a couple facts on the record. The board chair, handpicked by this prime minister, funneled more than $200,000 to her own company. So the ethics commissioner launched an investigation and she quit. They found more than $40 million in ineligible payments. So the Auditor General launched an investigation and the CEO quit. This government is doing absolutely nothing. So before the paper shredders get fired up over at Green Slush Fund headquarters, will the minister agree that a parliamentary inquiry needs to be expanded so we can get all the information in the latest scandal involving this prime minister and their corrupt government?
I'd say the answer is they're not interested. This ArriveCan scam is getting bigger by the day.
Question. He's not entitled to his own facts.
I've got to spend more time writing about it.
The board chair of SDTC was appointed by multiple governments, including a conservative government in the past. The Minister of Innovation has accepted the resignation of the chair of the board of SDTC. A process will begin soon to find a new leadership team. Our government is committed to ensure that organizations which receive federal funding adhere to the highest standards of governance, and we are committed to getting to the bottom of the allegations. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal government, there is a familiar smell here in this chamber, the smell of Liberal scandal. The President of Sustainable Development Technology Canada.
Scandal.
Imagine, she's a Liberal appointee and a friend of the Prime Minister, and she confirmed that she had used the Green
Fund
Fund
like
to give
napalm
a
in the morning.
$217,000 grant to
Smell
her
of
own
Liberal
company.
scandal.
Mr. Speaker, when and how does the government intend to recover taxpayers' money from the Green Fund that is enriching the Prime Minister's Liberal pals?
Yeah, this is interesting comment from Marvin Wilson here. Trudeau's ex-wife, that's Sophie, was one of the first to get the 2-week isolation from the scam-demic, March 2020. They were paying people twice under this ad scam, or the ArriveCan scam. They were paying agencies twice to do the same thing, and the same thing was in the beginning nonsense.
The chair of the board, and a process will begin very shortly to ensure that a new leadership team is appointed. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for
The Honourable Member for Dorval-Lachine-LaSalle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Artists and creators are operating in a cultural reality.
There's Ms. of the Islamophobia.
Where nowadays the way we consume movies and TV shows and music is very different. There has been
Notice she's been quite quiet about that lately.
Households are unsubscribing from
With
cable
all of
to
these
watch shows
anti-Semitic
online, but one thing
protests
has
in the
not
streets.
changed, and that is
She's
the
kept her
importance
big
of
mouth
having
shut for a
stories
long
made
time now.
by us. And for us, can the minister tell us about plans to ensure the protection and promotion of Canadian content and creators on online platforms? Thank you
and
very much.
she gets up for the nice
Honourable Minister
softball
of
there.
Canadian Heritage. Mr. Speaker, my colleague is very right. The audiovisual landscape
Yes,
has
she's
totally
very right.
changed since
Actually,
the
she's very
Broadcasting
left.
Act was first introduced, and that's why we are modernizing it to adapt it to today's digital universe. In fact, recently I met with actors in the cultural sector to
Anyway,
announce
blah, blah,
the
blah.
final policy directive, which aims to protect
Some good
users
comments here.
and support jobs in Canada.
Rather than listening to
We
Pascal.
want journalists and artists and everyone in
Here, I want to read some of these comments here. What from Michelle A. Mattia? What drugs are these delusional liberals on? FFS for F's sake. I would say fentanyl.
Two senior bureaucrats were caught lying to committee about their role in hiring a two-person basement company for the $54 million Arrive scam. With cozy relationships with this government, GC Strategies was hired over Deloitte, Microsoft, and Apple. Outrageous. Which Liberal minister hired the company and paid them 11 million taxpayer dollars for doing absolutely nothing?
That's what
The Honourable Minister.
That's part of the deal. You don't have to do anything. And Dominate L'Adult is up here.
Repeatedly that we expect all public officials responsible for contracting to follow the appropriate rules.
Looks like he's had a
In this
night's
case,
sleep in
the
a while.
Canadian Border Services Agency identified irregularities during a routine audit and referred the matter to the appropriate authorities that are investigating. And Mr. Speaker, people who did not follow the appropriate contracting rules will face the consequences according to law.
What will the consequences be? They might have to wait a year or two to get a contract. Another contract.
Years of this Liberal NDP government, one thing is clear: they have no respect for the Canadian taxpayer. GC Strategies, a two-person company working out of their basement, got paid $11 million to send messages on LinkedIn to other companies to build the ArriveCan app.
No,
This
it's
Prime
it's
Minister
scandalous. It is scandalous.
the cost. Bureaucrats
It just
refuse
makes
to
you
say
so
who
mad.
signed the paper to hire GC Strategies for $11 million. So I'm going to ask this Liberal caucus, which Liberal minister paid $11 million for GC Strategies?
Well, no, that's a damn good question. I ask you all out there watching today, who the hell is going to pay you and your wife $11 million? Or you and your husband? Or you and your brother or sister $11 million?
And doesn't make it accurate. She knows very well that the authorities
Go
in
get
these
some rest,
contracting
Dominique
matters
L'Adult.
are in the hands of public servants. And we've said very clearly, Mr. Speaker, that the committee can investigate and should investigate these matters. The Canadian Border Services Agency uncovered the contracting challenge, Mr. Speaker, in an internal audit and did what is appropriate, referred it to the appropriate authorities, and those who didn't follow the rules will be held accountable under law.
Yeah. Kelly notes again that Dominique L'Adult looks like he tied one on last night. You didn't say L'Adult, I did. You verbalized or you expressed exactly what was on my mind, Kelly, but I wasn't going to say it.
Across this country will pay $1,000 to employ these foreign workers. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the
Don't
Prime
keep
Minister
saying that worth
reverse
the
his
cost.
decision and commit that all jobs at the Stellantis plant will go to Canadian paychecks and not foreign workers?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as a Windsorite, I am proud that it was this Liberal government that delivered the battery plant.
I'm
for
glad you got
Windsor,
something to be proud of.
2,500 jobs. Mr. Speaker, we will
Hey,
continue
you know
to
all
work
these
with
electric
unions. We'll continue to work
these
with
electric
Stellantis
car
to make
plants
sure that local Canadian
are all
workers
falling
are
through the floor.
prioritized. It's 2,500
They're
good
just
jobs will
they're
be
never going to
created at
happen.
this plant. Those are the facts, Mr. Speaker. We believe in Canadian workers.
This
We
is all
believe
a
in
great
electric
big
vehicles.
facade.
We believe in climate
It's a
change.
big charade.
Why is the
There's
Conservative
no
leader so against
there's
the
no
battery
magic
plant, so
electric
against
car
Canadian
plant opening
workers,
in
and is
your
completely
backyard.
empty on climate change.
And this is all nonsense. But You know, it's just incredible that here this is going to be a softball.
Sectors and
Oh.
supporting more than 2 million jobs. No other sector has an economic impact that reaches from coast to coast to coast. This was highlighted in the federal tourism growth strategy this summer, and it's why we will continue to support our tourism strategy. Can the minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario tell us how our government is supporting
God,
local tourism?
It must be embarrassing to ask stupid questions like that.
The Honourable Minister.
But
Thank
thank God, when I worked there, I never had to write that
opportunity to talk
crap.
about the great
Excuse me.
announcement made
It's
by
about
my
said shit.
colleague today, the Minister of Tourism, that will grow the tourism sector. The newly launched tourism growth program will support expanding and developing
What is
local
it?
tourism
This
businesses
is a
from
game,
coast to
and I
coast
think
to
people
coast.
are actually
Our
falling
government
for
knows
this.
that local tourism
You know,
grows
it's
our
like writing their
economy,
news releases
creates
the way
good
they do.
Canadian jobs, and will continue to position Canada as a destination choice for domestic and international travelers. Thank you to all those who work in the tourism sector. Please take a look at the tourism growth program and
They're all wonderful people. It's so clear.
The Honourable Member from Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, it was revealed that 1,500 temporary foreign workers could be coming to Windsor to work on the building of the new Stellantis LGEV battery plant that is receiving $15 billion in taxpayer money from the federal and provincial governments. Now, both the federal Liberal and Ford's Conservatives committed to jobs and training guarantees for local workers, and they had 18 months to get this right. Communities in Windsor and Ontario expect what was promised. Will the Liberals guarantee that these jobs are unionized and go to the people in Windsor, Tecumseh, Essex, % goes to foreign workers?
Here, here.
Very interesting. Yeah, he was ready for that one.
Our government is focused on creating partnerships and driving investments to create good, sustainable jobs for Canadians. Thanks to our government's support for this project, 2,500 full-time positions will be created at the Windsor Battery Plant, and an additional 2,500 local tradespeople will be engaged. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, thank you for pushing those numbers up
That's
today. I
well.
really appreciate that.
Mr. Speaker, 8 years
This
after
is-
the rollout of the
This is
Phoenix
the
Pay
traditional
system, the situation
independent
is not
minute
improving. In fact, it's getting
at
worse.
the end of
As
question
today,
period.
242,000 transactions are still pending.
I didn't
which
realize
is
we had so
twice
many
as
independents in
as
the
2
House
years
right now.
ago. Now, I understand that at the beginning of Phoenix, in a partisan squabble, the Liberal government wanted to try to pin the blame on the former Conservative government. But they've been in power for 8 years now, so no excuses are valid anymore for explaining why this
anyway.
fiasco hasn't been solved.
You know, I say again, you know, the stuff that is coming out right now about this government is so disturbing, and there's so much more to understand about this arrive can scam. Oh, every time this guy stands up, I laugh because this is the guy who was the COVID king, and because he got it so often, yet he was the health minister who said, "Keep getting your shot until the day you die." And of course, I'm never getting another one. I can tell you that. I got 2, and I'm still suffering from the effects of those. I'm not getting another one. I really bought into it in the beginning, but no more. No more.
Of members in the presence of the gallery, the Honourable Mitzi Dean, Minister of Children and Family Development for the province of British Columbia.
Oh, how nice.
It is also my pleasure to draw to the attention of members to the presence in the gallery of the recipients of the 2023 Governor General's History Awards.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, every time the speaker points to the gallery and recognizes people now, it's just it's so funny because it's like we can't forget the time the previous speaker noted that there is a former Waffen SS member in the gallery there, and everybody stood up not once but twice and applauded him. So it's quite, it's hard now just to see what used to be an ordinary occurrence in the House of Commons, sometimes every day. But now, of course, it's embarrassing because of the Liberals. The Liberals have truly shamed Canada again and again and again, and that's what they're all about. So anyway, thank you very much for watching and listening today. Thanks for getting those numbers up into the hundreds. Tell your friends about this. I try to do this every day. I won't be doing it tomorrow because of the protest that's going on in Parliament Hill. And that's, once again, you can get there around 12:30 for 1 o'clock at the Centennial Flame. I encourage you to be there. And thanks very much for watching today. And I will be back on Wednesday with more. Just hold on a sec. I've got some break. Nope, nothing to report. See you all back here Wednesday. Go to the protest if you can tomorrow. We need to save the farmers from the carbon tax. And I'm going to look into this UN story a little further, but I can tell you this, if there's a possibility of Trudeau colluding with the United Nations to overrule Canadian law, he will do it. Thanks for watching again, and we'll be back soon.